He also writes books, and we're going to see 3 of his books on the next slide. The most recent one is Best Practices in Demand Forecasting. A very good book, very recommended. Today, he's going to talk to us about machine learning in forecasting supply chain demand. So everybody, let's listen to him.
Perfect. Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everyone. Usually, people like to introduce themselves at the start of a presentation, a conference. But instead, I would like to speak about my own learning journey. And as you will see, I'm still on this journey, and I'm still myself learning a lot of things. So I started to interest myself and to go deep into supply chain planning, demand planning, and inventory planning around 2016. And around 2018, I started to use machine learning to forecast demand. So 2018 it's a long time ago, that's 6 years ago. Back then you had no ChatGPT, you didn't have a lot of resources online on how to do it yourself. So it was kind of difficult, you had to try things on your own, and maybe it worked, and most of the time it doesn't work. So after a while, I decided to start writing about what I was doing, the experiment I was running, and how I was doing things to share that with the world in a very practical way so everyone could basically replicate. That was my first book, Supply Chain, Data Science for Supply Chain Forecasting. After that, I moved back to inventory planning, and I was thinking, okay, most of the theory, does it work? Does it really apply to real life? Can I try this out using simulation? And I made a second book. These 2 first books were very quantitative, model-driven. These are books where you can replicate what I do using Python and Excel, but it's very, very quantitative. My third book, Demand Forecasting Best Practices, is more a book for managers and supply chain leaders on how to lead, to manage their process, on how to construct their process and lead their process to success as a manager, as a leader, not as a data scientist. And today, I will give you a 40 minutes, 1 hour summary of this last book. What are the best practices you can implement in a supply chain to lead it to success regarding demand planning? I hope that if we meet again in a few years, I can show you a 4th book, most likely about inventory again. So to start this discussion on demand planning and forecasting accuracy for supply chain, oftentimes when I discuss that with a prospect, with a client, one of the first questions I get is it worth it? Am I going to get money out of that? How much? What's the return on investment for a project regarding demand forecasting? Now, I believe it's impossible to give you a formula that would tell you how much money you would get. And I went online and I tried to find different sources on how much you would get from improving your forecasting accuracy. The debate is still on. On the right side of the screen, you can see, so SupChains, that's my company, so I quoted myself on my own slide. I think that's allowed by law. But you can see different numbers from different companies on how much you can expect out of it. To conclude these numbers, I would say that improving your forecasting accuracy will result in great business outcomes, except if you have a supply chain planning that is so poor that demand forecasting is disconnected from the rest of your supply chain. So you would improve the forecast, but no one's using it, then of course you get 0 value out of it. But the exact amount of value you would get depends on your supply chain, depends on how good or bad your supply planning is, and there is no formula that would really help you to get a general answer to that. So demand forecasting is important. Forecasting accuracy is important, so you would think we are very good as supply chain professionals at forecasting demand. Now it happens that if you look at scientific research, academic review, we're not so good. They run multiple research, and I'm summarizing a lot of research in just one sentence, but they concluded that 50% of the time when a human review, enrich, change a forecast, they don't add value, which is a nice way to say that they destroy value, which is still a nice way to say that if they don't touch it, the total accuracy would still be more or less the same. Okay, so we are not good at forecasting demand as supply chain professional. In the next 40 minutes, I'll try to give you an answer, so what can we do as human and how machine learning will fit into this picture, okay? Before we jump into answering this question, I'd like to take a step back and first answer the question, why do we do this? Why, as supply chain professional, we have to forecast demand? For me, you have 2 very different processes. You have the demand forecasting process and the supply planning process. Demand forecasting, it's all about information. You know, you're the pirate on top of the ship, you're looking at the horizon, and you try to say to your colleagues, your pirate colleagues on the ship, okay, this is what I see, and now it's up to you to make a decision about it. It could be an aggressive decision, it could be a conservative decision, it could be no decision, that's fine. It's up to you, and you're gonna use a lot of inputs to do that, among which my forecast on what's ahead on the horizon, okay? And I like to make a very strong difference between these two processes. One, demand forecasting, again, is only related to finding information about the future of the most likely outcome that is unbiased and unconstrained. This is what my client will want to buy in the future, assuming we have infinite supply. And then you have your supply planning process, who could decide, okay, I want to purchase or produce more than the forecast, less than the forecast, something different for some reason, whatever. That is totally fine. But these two processes must be different. I will show you in a few slides what happens if you kind of mixed up, confuse these two processes into a single one, then you get poor decision, a lot of fights. So demand planners, they provide unbiased information about the future. It's about providing information to decision makers, and then decision makers make decision. And by decision makers, I also include the whole process, tools, and engine of supply planning, not just the human. Okay, so how do I define demand planning excellence, which is my overall objective, and machine learning is very important there, but that's just one piece of the building. Demand planning excellence, for me, that's two main parts, efficacy and efficiency. Efficacy means that as demand forecaster, we forecast something that's useful for our colleagues, so something that our colleagues can use in practice to make the right decision. So my objective is not just to be accurate, my objective is that my forecasts are useful, the granularity is fine, the horizon is fine, and so on. And then on the right side of the screen, I want to be efficient. So basically, I want to make the forecast as good as possible with as little effort as possible, okay? So I'm forecasting the right thing, meaning I support decision, and on the right side, I'm trying to make it as smart as possible and reduce workload. We will not discuss today much of efficacy, but basically, the first things I would discuss with people is usually, are we sure that we're forecasting demand and not sales? That's very important. Do we use the right granularity, the right horizon? And finally, are we using the right forecasting KPIs? So these would be the three pillars of efficacy. Today, we're going to discuss about the other one, efficiency. For me, efficiency, it all goes to we want to have an insight-driven demand forecasting process, meaning that we want to spend time finding information, data, insights about demand, about future demand, about what's likely to happen. This goes hand in hand with machine learning. We're going to discuss that. I like to quote it as bulletproof and automated. And finally, and this is critically important, we have forecast value added. These are the 4 steps in the process that I would recommend supply chain to follow. These are the 4 steps we're going to talk about today. The first step is we need to find data, insights about demand, about what our clients want to do. The second step is we need to implement this bulletproof automated machine learning engine. Third step is how can we, human planners, enrich these forecasts? And finally, the last step that is absolutely critical is we need to track forecast value added. So the first thing is, as a supply chain, we need to understand what's driving demand for us. Usually, it's always the same guys that would be promotion. We would like to look at shortages, life cycle, pricing at times, but this is quite difficult. We can look at the weather. We could also include there, for some supply chain, we have information about the sellout of a client, the point of sales data from a client, or the inventory position of a client. That would also be business driver. If I can have access to this information, and I know that right now my client has low sales and high inventory, I can already predict that they will not order a lot, if not anything at all, okay? For me, this first step, you don't have to be a data scientist, you don't need to be a demand planner. If you understand your business, if you understand your supply chain, you can already join me and try to draw a map, a picture of what kind of info you could get and how to use this info to forecast demand. Okay, so this first step, nothing technical here. The question is what's impacting demand, what's driving demand? And the question right after would be, do we have data about this? Oftentimes people will say, well, promotion is impacting clients' demand. That's normal. If you would tell me, well, promotion don't impact demand, then why do you do promotion? But most of the time, supply chain don't track promotion, for example. So we understand it's driving demand, but we don't track promotion historically, and we don't have a clear calendar for the future. So we cannot use it. So that's one of the first discussions I have is, what's impacting demand, and do we have data? Now the second step is to create something I call a bulletproof automated forecast engine. If you are a supply chain, you have to make forecast and decision at scale. So you have thousands of products, you maybe have 10, 100 location point of sale, so combination of that might be 100,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever. It means that if you need a human to create all these forecasts, to review all these forecasts one by one manually, it's impossible. You don't have the time, you don't have the resources to do that. And as we've seen on the first slide, humans are not great at doing this. So you need a tool to do this at scale. And for me, the tool that can do that needs to have two important things. The first one, I like to call it bulletproof. Bulletproof means that it can cope with most of the business driver we talked about. Do you do promotion? You need a tool that can deal with promotion. Do you have information about the sellout of your client? You need a tool that can cope with that. Do you have shortages? We need to have a tool that can cope with that. Do you have a lot of new products? Again, your forecast engine needs to cope with new product and pretty well. That's bulletproof. It can cope with anything. Automation means that you don't need to review manually this model every week or every month. You don't need to tweak it. You don't need to fine-tune it. You don't need to select the model, select the parameters, and so on. It's basically hands off. You can just let it run. It's automated. It's going to provide you a forecast for every single product you have, and it's going to do it in a bulletproof way. Now, why is machine learning so good at this, and why am I not advising you to use statistical model to do that? For me, statistical model struggle to understand complex relationship between shortages, promotion, prices, weather, sellouts, sell-in. It's too complex, okay? The statistical model are great at capturing some linear relationship, but as soon as it gets more complex than that, it gets difficult. Statistical model also suffer from something else. They kind of locally optimize product by product. So they don't understand what's happening for other products. They don't understand how this promotion might have impacted another similar product and so on. So for example, it means that if you launch a product a year and a half ago, you just have one observation regarding Black Friday, one observation regarding Christmas and so on. So it's very difficult to do any statistic out of one observation. Now, if you use machine learning is going to look at all your product. So machine learning might have seen like 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 times Black Friday and Christmas, and might understand from there what's the impact of such a promotion on a new product where we never had Black Friday before. I'm not saying it's totally impossible for statistical tool to do that. I'm saying it's extremely complicated and it's not super accurate. So all in all, I would directly go for machine learning that can capture these complicated relationship, and basically the more data, the more insights you have, the better machine learning is going to be. Now, in just a minute or two, how does machine learning work? When you deal with machine learning, you have two things that you need to pay attention to. What are the features, meaning the input, the insights that you drive to the tool, and what's the output you want to have? In our case, the output is pretty clear. We want to predict demand next week, next month, next quarter, and so on. Now, we can have, all together with business people, so not just PhD in math, but business people, we can have discussion on what's driving demand, what kind of data do we have. For, again, that would be, for example, promotion, seasonality, things like that, advertisement budget, and so on. So you could help me, you could help your data science team to come up with features that could be fed into this machine learning model. Again, you don't need to have a PhD in math to do that. You can be any business person with business insight regarding what's driving demand. You discuss that with the data science team, and they can include the features in the model. So when you want to optimize such a model, you can discuss two things. The features I just talked about, and then the second part is really the fine-tuning of this model. And there you need this kind of hard skills of data science, how to optimize a model. But that's the only part I would say in this process where you need to have this kind of very strong data science skills. It's the optimization of the model. To discuss the feature, anyone with business knowledge can do that and should do it. I'm called by a lot of companies to coach the data scientists to come up with better model. And for me, one of the main issues they have is that they don't have a lot of business knowledge. They don't want to spend time collecting and cleaning demand, and then they don't have the right features, meaning they don't have the right insights in their model, and then the model doesn't work, okay? So again, here, what they need is more business knowledge and more collaboration with the business. Now, machine learning is great, but please don't take my word for it. I need to prove to you that it works, okay? Maybe you like me, you trust me, but I don't want this. I want you to trust this because I can show you numbers. So let's discuss numbers. Over the last years, the forecasting community ran some competition online. Anyone could participate, including professional, students, academic, anyone. We had 3 competitions, all of them regarding retailers. All these competitions have been won by machine learning models, all of them. It's not just the top 1 participant that use machine learning, it's maybe the top 20 or top 30 participants. It means that basically if you have a new competition like this and you bring a statistical engine, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, you stand no chance. My personal experience with machine learning proves project after project that you can deliver a lot of value compared to statistical benchmark project after project. These projects are each time very different. Some of them I have a lot of data, and for some of them I just have this usual 36 months of demands and no driver, and this is it, and we don't know anything special. Again, each time we demonstrate that we add a lot of value compared to statistical benchmarks. I hope that in the future we can add more forecasting competition here, so we prove over and over that machine learning is delivering more value. Beyond that, the world of machine learning is evolving. People come up with new models, new ideas, new optimization ideas, and so on, new features, new way to use machine learning, so machine learning is still progressing. Statistical models, for me, are progressing, but very slowly. So I don't have high hopes that in the 5 next years, we would get a breakthrough from statistical engine, and statistical engine would shine again. On the other side, I have a lot of hope that machine learning will still grow, will become faster and more accurate. Now you could think, based on that, actually this is kind of a magic box. I just put my data into it and it's gonna work. It's not gonna work, okay? You have 1,000 of different ways to use machine learning. You have 1,000 different ways to set it up. You have 1,000 different ways to set up the features into the model. And if you don't do it the right way, it is not gonna work. I've seen a lot of companies contacting me saying, well, we use machine learning from this or from that or from this software or self-using that. It didn't work, so machine learning is not for us. We're not ready for that. Actually, the issue is not machine learning. The issue is how do you use it, how do you set it up, and what kind of features do you bring to the tool. If you don't do it the right way, it's not gonna work. So machine learning, it's not magic. You cannot just dump data in a neural network and just hope it's gonna work. Again, you have 1,000,000 ways to set up machine learning, and most of them will never work, but a few of them will drive a lot of value. So that's for machine learning. Let's go back to the human. So we, human demand planners, how do we fit the picture of demand planning, including machine learning? I like to basically call that playing the information game. So remember, 50% of the time, based on academics and research, when humans enrich a forecast, they don't add any value, which means that 50% of the times they basically make the forecast worse. So how can we do better? I quoted some of the research here and tried to summarize it, and then you have, of course, more research and more details, so I just tried to give my own summary of that. But what we see is planners like to do a lot of small adjustments, and small adjustments don't add value. And on top of that, it seems that people are very optimistic, and they like to increase forecast. And when they increase forecast, the likelihood that this adds value is very low. Now, when they decrease forecast, the likelihood this adds value is higher and higher. I think, and that's my personal opinion here, not the research, that when we decrease the forecast, we need to have a strong evidence, strong proof that it's gonna materialize, because we need to say this to our colleagues and we need to bring bad news. And as human beings, we don't like to bring bad news, and people are gonna question us about that. Now, if you bring good news, no one's gonna ask you a question. So as you can see on the research, well, it's not going good, but it gets worse. So basically, in supply chain, the issue we have, the issue we face, is that some people change the forecast not because they think it's going to make it more accurate, but because they think it's going to make the forecast fit their own agenda, their own requirements. So here, I try to give you a small story of what could happen. Each supply chain is different. You might have different people in different roles, but we always hear the same kind of stories. So some like to reduce the forecast because they want to beat it to get a bonus. So of course, if you ask these people, oftentimes the sales team, to make a forecast, they're going to make it as low as possible, so then they can come back and say, well, you know what, I oversold, so I want a bonus now. we have a lot of teams confusing the forecast and the supply plan. Remember when I started this discussion, I told you it's very, very important that we make a difference between demand forecast, which is just about providing information, and supply planning, which is about making a decision. Now, if we confuse the two, and you want to be on the safe side, you're going to inflate forecast. And in some companies, the supply planning capabilities are close to zero, and basically they confuse the demand forecast and the supply plan. And what they're going to do is we will order the forecast. So if we want to be on the safe side, if we want to have safety stock, that's easy. We just increase forecast. But they don't have a supply plan per se. We have also a lot of people in supply chain who just want to fit the budget, so they get no question from management or shareholders. If the budget is $1 million, they're going to put $1 million to make sure we finish the year with $1 million. And that's harming accuracy, which means this is going to result in poor decision regarding supply planning, because supply planners are going to use this forecast to make decision, and the forecast is just matching budget. What I've seen also is shortage gaming. So people heard that the central production facility is going to run out of stock, and they have their own country buying from this central production facility, and what they're going to do is to say, well, I'm going to increase my forecast because there is a shortage. I want to be safe against that. And basically, you will have in the same company, different markets, different countries fighting each other to get scarce resources. For me, we always need to go back to the idea that a demand forecast is just about providing unbiased information. And if yourself, you have a specific incentive, a specific bias to go in a direction or the other, you should not touch the forecast. Let me then discuss, I think, one of the most important points here, forecast value added. So let's imagine you have a simple process. You have a forecast engine. It could be anything. It could even be Excel. That's fine. You just have a forecast engine that generates a baseline for you. Then your demand planning team is going to review that, then the sales team, and maybe some sort of SNOP consensus meeting. Now, what I usually see in supply chain is people are going to evaluate the quality of their process by tracking, okay, what's the final accuracy of this? And they say, 45% error, that's better than last month. Great job, guys. You're going to get a promotion or bonus or something like that. Most supply chain function like this. Now, I think this is the wrong way of doing it. The right way of doing it is asking the question, do we, as a process, add value? Did we improve the forecasting accuracy? How can we measure that? So what we want to do is to track the forecasting accuracy and bias. It's very important that we do both for every single step in the process. I like to combine these two into a single number, the score. So as you can see, the score is the sum of the mean absolute error and the bias. I'm taking the absolute bias here, otherwise you can basically hack it by under-forecasting minus 100%. But basically I'm summing both into one thing I call the score. What you want to do, step after step in your process, even individual after individual, you want to reduce the score, which is like the forecast error. So in my story, demand planners are doing great. They reduced the score from 48 to 44, they reduced the forecast error. This is great, they did a great job. The sales team did not. In my story, the sales team basically just wanted to increase the forecast so they would secure supply to make sure they could sell as much as possible. So they're basically confusing the supply plan and the demand forecast. Finally, the consensus meeting slightly improved things compared to the sales team, but not much, and we would conclude that they don't add much value compared to the time they spent on this. So do we add value? No. We destroy value. So this is not a good process. It's not working great. Again, if you just would stick to the forecasting KPI, you could say, well, this is 1 point better than last month or 2 points better than last year, so I'm doing great. You are not doing great. Maybe this month was just a very smooth month and the team got lucky. But if you look at the added value, it's negative, so it's not doing great. So one of the things I would really like to reinforce here is that I would never give forecasting accuracy targets to different teams and different markets. Even if it's based on last year, last month, or whatever, or saying, well, if you reach 60% accuracy by the end of the year, we're going to give you a bonus. For me, this is a really bad idea. What we need to do instead is to set targets in terms of added value. If you say to a team, if you reach 60%, you get some sort of bonus or anything, some team will reach that simply because their market is super smooth, no promotion, no shortage, very easy. Some teams will never touch that simply because the market is so difficult with so many promotion or new competitors and so on. This is out of their control. You cannot blame them for that. But maybe this team is adding a lot of value compared to your forecast engine. So actually, they are doing a great job, but still the accuracy is worse than their colleagues. There is one point missing here, And I think most companies never thought about it and never did it. And the last question is, but what about the forecast model? Is this forecast engine adding any value? Now, most of the people I'm asking this question to would reply something like, we just have a new implementation, we do an automated selection among 12 models, so it can only be great, things like that. It's automatically optimized, so it can only be super strong. I even had someone saying, it can only be great, I've been working on it for 3 years now. So how do we track this? We basically need to compare the forecasting accuracy achieved by a model against a statistical benchmark. Now, this statistical benchmark should be something like the moving average of the last 12 months or the moving average of the last 3 months. Something very simple, something you can do for free in your software, in Excel, in anything, something very, very basic. If it's more complicated than that, I would say it's not a benchmark anymore. It's a new model, which is great. You can do new models, but it shouldn't be considered a statistical benchmark. Now, in my story here, we add value compared to the benchmark, so everything is great. The forecast engine is really good. Most often, when I discuss with companies that never did that before, so they never compare themselves to a moving average 12 months, they realize that they don't add value to this moving average, because basically the forecast engine is destroying value compared to the moving average. So their team improved compared to the forecast engine, but the forecast engine is worse than a moving average 12 months. And to be honest, when you find out that your forecast engine that you just invested millions or a month or years in implementing does not bring more value or less value than a moving average, it's kind of, I mean, it's impressive. But I've seen this many times that actually a moving average 12 months beats forecasting engine. So I would strongly advise you to do that. The way, again, before we move on to the next topic, for me, forecast value added, it's the cornerstone of demand planning excellence. If you don't do that, you're basically in the dark. You have no idea if you're adding value, if your tool is adding value, if your team is adding value. There is no way you can improve, and there is no way you can know if anyone in your team is doing a great or a poor job, and you would be surprised. So when I discuss with prospects, when I discuss with clients, this is the first thing I want to implement, because if we don't do it, there is no way we know if we're going in the right direction. Now, I did not reply to the initial question, how can human add value? With forecast value added, with this framework, that's great. We're going to see if people do it, but we don't yet provided any guidance on what to do. And I think it's very important, especially if you implement some great machine learning tool, that we give a clear vision to our teams, to human. How do you fit in this picture? What do you have to do now? Because I think the role of a demand planner in a normal setting where the forecast engine doesn't work great, so people like to tweak around, fine-tune, review, do their own thing in Excel. When they move on to a fully automated and bulletproof machine learning engine, the role is changing, so the way they add value must change as well. And I think it's very important that we give a clear vision for human on what to do now. So the main responsibility for demand planners, as I see it, is collecting, cleaning data. And I know it's not sexy, and when I do project, that's always the thing that's overlooked. People don't want to invest time, don't want to invest money, but this is critically important. As soon as you have machine learning, you want to have clean data, you want to have promotion data, shortage, prices, advertisement, and so on. The more, the better, but again, if you don't have so much data, we can still do great things. Nevertheless, we need to clean that. Just think about product life cycle, things like that. We need to clean data. Now, all this data will go to your machine learning engine that can cope with as much data as possible, but you will still get insights. For example, you can call your client. Machine learning cannot call your client, at least for now. So you could get more information than what your machine learning model is aware of. That's great, and that's what you should do. You should collect extra insights. So you're like some sort of detective, journalist, reporter. You go on the field and you get more information. You call your client. And using that, you can enrich this forecast, improve this forecast using the insights you got. So I like to say that if you know something, do something. But if you don't have any special insights about your forecast, don't change anything. In some cases, demand planners can still beat a forecast engine without any kind of insights. At times, anyone can be lucky or unlucky, models and human, that's fine. But if month after month, your team can deliver more value than a forecast engine without anything special, just by looking at the time series, it means the forecast engine needs to be improved, and it's an issue of forecast engine. So again, I don't think the human brain is a calculator machine. So if the human brain can beat a model at forecasting demand, it means the model isn't great. So these are the 3 things that I would focus on as a demand planner. Now, there are 3 things that I would not do. The first thing is cleaning outliers. And I know there are a lot of discussion on how to clean outliers, what's the detection range, what's the algorithm, and so on. I think in supply chain, we should not do that. I personally don't clean outliers. I don't do that. I clean transaction, I clean demand, I clean master data. I feed promotion and shortages to my engine. And based on that, the engine is doing a great forecast, and the up and downs make sense for the tool. So for me, all your time should be on data cleaning, and we should not spend any time doing outlier detection. Over the last 4 years, I only had to do some outlier detection technique once on a single project. That's just to say that I don't think that should be the core practice for supply chain people, and that should be an extreme, extreme exception. The second thing is tweaking model. I was recently discussing with someone who told me, well, I'm about to hire a new demand planner. I want someone who has quantitative skills, who's able to tweak, to refine, to fine-tune models, and so on. For me, that's not needed. You want your model, again, to be fully automated. You don't want a human to do a manual selection, manual tweaking, and anything like that. You want an engine, an optimization engine, to do that for you at scale automatically. It cannot rely on human to manually do that time series after time series. For me, it makes no sense. You will never scale, and you have an issue of variability. Finally, demand planners should not take supply into account. For many supply chain, I've seen people saying, yeah, I need to take these shortages into account, because basically, if I have a shortage, I'm going to sell 0, and if I put a forecast that's anywhere above 0, I'm going to get a bad forecasting accuracy metric. It makes sense, but that's because this supply chain is not forecasting unconstrained demands, they're forecasting constrained sales, and I would advise strongly against that. I think supply chain people, demand planners, should never take supply into account for the future, because you would get into a vicious circle. So to summarize this circle, let's imagine today you have a shortage. So you forecast 0 because, well, reasonably, tomorrow you will sell 0 because you have 0 pieces in stock, right? So your 0 sales forecast will be 100% accurate. Now, if you do that and you send this forecast to the supply planning teams, they're going to see that your forecast is 0 pieces. They're going to order 0 pieces as well, because they're going to basically supply based on the forecast. Now, as soon as you do that, you are in a vicious circle where there is a shortage, so 0 sales, so 0 forecast, so 0 supply, and then you just get stuck into that. So what we want to do instead is that if there is a shortage, you don't want to evaluate the quality of your forecast when there is a shortage, because no one knows what the real unconstrained demand was, simply because there was no inventory. So you can forecast 100, you will not get blamed for over forecasting sales because we don't know the real demand. So last question I'd like to answer regarding priorities of human, again, assuming you have some great machine learning tool. In the past, I've seen many supply chain planners relying on something like ABC classification, saying, well, I'm going to start first by reviewing my biggest client or my biggest product and so on. I'm not totally opposed to that, but I think it's a bit outdated, if not totally updated. For me, the real question is not what product should I review first. The real question would be, what do I know? What kind of insight I could get, what did I hear about my client, and then you review, you enrich the specific product and client. So instead of focusing on the biggest product, biggest client, you should focus on what kind of information you can get and what do you know, and let your machine learning engine cope with all the other product automatically, and you can safely assume that the machine learning engine knows, and you should only act if you know something. So instead of focusing on the biggest client and product, focus on insights. So to conclude, how can we ensure that we can add value as demand planner? We need to track forecast value added, we need to focus on insight, and we need to let our machine learning engine cope with most of the product. It was a pleasure discussing this with you. If you want to stay in touch, you can just add me on LinkedIn, where I'm quite active, so it would be my pleasure to stay in touch. In the meantime, I think we have some time left for a question. Yes.
All right, thank you.